The massive briefing room aboard Station Aurora. 5 buzzed with nervous energy as 24 cadets from across the galaxy shuffled into their seats. Commander Velterra walked to front, her sleek purple skin catching the overhead lights. She was Krillian, one of the more intimidating species in the known universe, standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 golden eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously. "Settle down," she barked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen real combat. The room fell silent immediately. James Mitchell looked around at his classmates and couldn't help but feel like he'd walked into the wrong building. To his left sat a Gorvani warrior named Thrak, whose massive frame was already encased in battle armor that looked like it could stop a tank round. The guy had to be at least 7 feet tall and built like a mountain. His skin was gray and rocky, literally rocky, with small stones embedded in his flesh that serve as natural armor. On James's right, a Zephyrian named Crystal Lee sat perfectly still. Her entire body seemed to be made of living crystal that shifted between blue and green colors. She didn't need armor because she basically was armor. When she moved, tiny musical notes rang out from her crystalline structure. Behind them, 3 Clickery cadets chittered each other in their bug-like language. They looked like giant praying mantises wearing high-tech gear, their compound eyes reflecting the room's lights like disco balls. Even the smallest of them was taller than James when standing upright. "Today we begin combat simulation training," Commander Velterra announced, pacing back and forth like a caged predator. "The plasma training rounds are calibrated to incapacitate, not kill. They will hurt, but you will survive." She paused and let her 4 eyes scan the room slowly. "These weapons fire concentrated energy bursts that will temporarily shut down your nervous system. For most species, this causes immediate paralysis lasting approximately 10 minutes. The pain is described as intense but manageable." James adjusted his standard-issue chest plate, which felt ridiculously light compared to what everyone else was wearing. The armor looked like something a mall security guard might wear, while his classmates were geared up for war. He caught a few aliens staring at him with what he could only describe as pity. "The training scenarios will test your reflexes, tactical thinking, and ability to work as a unit under fire," Velterra continued. "You'll face automated defense systems, moving targets, and surprise attacks. Some of you will be eliminated in the first hour. This is normal." A Thorian cadet in the front row raised a massive clawed hand. "Commander, what happens if we're hit multiple times?" "Good question, Corvex. Multiple hits can cause temporary organ failure in some species. Our medical team is standing by, but I strongly advise you to avoid getting shot." A few nervous laughs echoed through the room. Velterra's 4 eyes suddenly locked onto James. The room seemed to grow quieter, if that was even possible. "Human," she said, her voice carrying no concern that made everyone turn to look at him. "Your species' medical file indicates significant fragility compared to your classmates. Soft tissue, hollow bones, single-layer skin. Are you certain you wish to participate in full combat training?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. James could feel every set of eyes, compound eyes, and optical sensors in the room focus on him. Thrak leaned over and whispered, "Friend James, perhaps you should consider the observation program instead. No shame in keeping yourself alive." Even Crystalise turned her crystal head toward him, making soft chiming sounds that he'd learned meant concern in her species. James looked around at all the worried faces and couldn't help but smile. These aliens had spent weeks getting to know him during orientation, and they genuinely care about his well-being. It was actually pretty touching in a weird way. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his grin widening. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Commander Velterra's expression didn't change, but James caught something that might have been respect flickering in one of her golden eyes. "Very well, but you will be monitored closely. The medical team has specific instructions regarding human physiology." The other cadets exchanged glances that clearly said they thought James had just signed his own death warrant. Everyone in the galaxy knew that humans were basically held together with hope and determination. Their bones were hollow like bird bones, their skin was paper-thin, and they had no natural armor or defensive capabilities whatsoever. "Equipment distribution begins in 5 minutes," Velterra announced. "Remember, this training separates soldiers from civilians. Not everyone here will make it to graduation. As the room began to empty, Throck placed a gentle but massive hand on James's shoulder. Stay close to me during the exercises, little friend. I will protect you. James patted the rocky hand and chuckled. Thanks, big guy. I appreciate it. He had no idea that in just a few hours, he'd be the one doing protecting. The world around them shimmered and changed as the holographic training system came online. One moment James was standing in a plain white room with his two teammates, and the next he was surrounded by a realistic cityscape that looked like it had been ripped from a war zone. Concrete buildings rose up on all sides, their walls scarred with blast marks and bullet holes. Broken windows stared down like empty eyes, and rubble was scattered across the cracked streets. "Whoa," James whispered, reaching out to touch a nearby wall. His hand passed right through it, but the illusion was so perfect that his brain insisted it was real. The air even smelled like dust and smoke. First time in a full immersion sim? Asked Beth, the Zephyrian scout. Her crystalline body was already shifting colors to match their surroundings, turning from blue to gray like some kind of living camouflage. Pretty amazing tech, right? It's incredible, James replied, looking around in wonder. I can hear traffic in the distance, birds chirping, even the wind through the buildings. Corvex, the massive Thorian warrior, clanked up beside them in his heavy armor. The guy was built like a walking tank, with thick plates covering every inch of his body. His helmet had a distinctive T-shaped visor that made him look like an ancient knight, if ancient knights were 8 feet tall and made of living rock. Less sightseeing, more surviving, Corvex rumbled, his deep voice echoing through his comm system. These training scenarios are designed to eliminate half the team in the first 10 minutes. James looked at the tactical display on his wrist. Red dots marked the positions of automated defense turrets throughout the maze-like streets. Their objective was simple: reach the extraction point on the far side of the city without getting shot. Easy in theory, deadly in practice. "Stay behind me, human," Corvex ordered, hefting his massive shield. "These plasma rounds will punch right through you like you're made of paper. I've seen the specs on your species. No offense, but you're basically a walking target." "None taken," James said, checking his weapon. It was a basic pulse rifle, the kind given to new recruits. Compared to the military-grade hardware his teammates were carrying, it looked like a toy. Beth was already moving. Her crystalline form flowed between shadows like liquid light. "I'll scout ahead," she chimed, her voice creating musical notes in the air. "Give me 30 seconds to check the first intersection." The Zephyrian disappeared around a corner, leaving James alone with the giant warrior. Corvex looked down at him through his visor, and James could see genuine concern in the alien's glowing red eyes. "Listen, friend James," Corvex said quietly. "I know you want to prove yourself, but this isn't the place for heroics. These turrets are programmed to target the biggest threat first, which means they'll probably ignore you completely. Use that to your advantage." James nodded, but something about the advice bothered him. He'd spent his whole life being underestimated because of his size, and it was getting old fast. What if someone needs help? "Then you call for backup and stay out of the way," Corvex replied firmly. "Your job is to survive, not to play hero." Beth's voice crackled through their comms. "All clear to the first waypoint. 2 turrets visible, but they're in standby mode. Move up slow and quiet." They advanced through the urban maze, Corvex taking point with his shield raised. James followed close behind, his rifle ready, but feeling useless compared to his teammates' impressive firepower. The artificial city felt alive around them, with distant sounds of combat from other training teams echoing off the buildings. Contact left. Beth's warning came just as a sharp whistle filled the air. A concealed turret had powered up from its hiding spot in a bombed-out storefront. The automated weapon swiveled toward them with mechanical precision, its targeting laser painting a red on Corvex's armor. The Thorian was turning to face the threat, but his massive bulk made him slow to react. James saw it all happening in slow motion. The turret's charge indicators were flashing green, meaning it was about to fire. The plasma bolt would streak out at near light speed, aimed directly at Corvex's side where his armor had a gap for mobility. The big alien would be hit before he could get his shield in position. Without thinking, without hesitating, Without considering the consequences, James threw himself sideways. His shoulder connected with Corvex's armored flank, and despite the massive size difference, the impact was enough to throw the Thorian off balance. The plasma bolt caught James square in the chest instead. The energy discharge was like being hit by lightning and a freight train at the same time. Every nerve in his body screamed as the concentrated energy tore through him. The impact lifted him clean off his feet and sent him flying backward to the air like a rag doll. James slammed into the concrete wall behind them with a wet, sickening crack that echoed to the simulated street. His body crumpled to the ground and went completely still. Simulation freeze. Medical emergency. Corvex's roar shattered the silence as the entire training scenario came to an immediate halt. The artificial cityscape flickered and began to fade as emergency protocols kicked in. The alarm klaxon started wailing before Corvex even finished his shout. Red emergency lights bathed the training facility in an eerie glow as the holographic cityscape completely dissolved around them. Within seconds, the sterile white walls of the real training room were visible again, along with James's still body lying crumpled against what had been a concrete wall moments before. Medical team to Sector 7. Code red. Human down. Commander Velterra's voice boomed through every speaker in the facility, her four-eyed face appearing on emergency screens throughout the academy. All training exercises suspended immediately. The other training groups materialized as their simulations shut down. Cadets from different scenarios suddenly finding themselves standing in adjacent training bays. Word spread like wildfire through the ranks. The human had been hit. The human was down. The human might be dead. Dr. Winara, the Academy's chief medical officer, burst through the doors at a full sprint. Her 6 legs carried her insectoid form faster than most species could run. Behind her came a team of medical specialists from various worlds, each carrying equipment designed for different alien physiologies. The Etherian medic floated rather than ran, her energy form crackling with healing frequencies. A bulky Gornian paramedic lumbered behind them, medical supplies rattling in his massive hands. "Clear the area. Everyone back," Dr. Winara shouted as she reached the scene. Her compound eyes could process medical data faster than any computer, and what she saw made her mandibles click in distress. The other cadets had formed a stunned circle around James's motionless form, but none dared get too close. Thrak, the massive Gorvani warrior, stood with his rocky hands clenched into fists, his usually stoic expression showing genuine anguish. The Clickery students were chittering anxiously to each other, their insect-like heads shaking in disbelief. "Move! Now!" Dr. Winara commanded, and the cadets scrambled backward to give the medical team room to work. Corvex remained kneeling beside James, his massive armored form shaking like a leaf. The Thorian's red eyes were wide with horror as he stared down at the human who had saved his life. "I should have been faster," he whispered, his voice cracking through his comm system. "The human, he saved my life. He threw himself in front of a plasma bolt meant for me." Beth materialized beside them, her crystalline body shifting rapidly between colors as her emotional state fluctuated. Is he dead?" she asked, her musical voice discordant with grief. Dr. Winara activated her handheld medical scanner and began running it over James's still form. The device beeped frantically as it tried to make sense of human physiology. "Plasma discharge at point-blank range," she muttered to her team, studying the readouts with growing concern. "Direct chest hit with full energy transfer. At that range, it would liquefy most species' internal organs." The Etherian medic floated closer, her energy form pulsing with diagnostic light. "The impact force alone should have shattered his skeletal structure," she said in her wispy voice. "I'm detecting massive trauma to the spinal column from the wall impact. His spine should be completely severed," Dr. Winara continued, her scanner beeping more urgently. "Multiple vertebrae should be fractured, ribs broken, internal bleeding. By all medical knowledge, this human should be—" She paused, not wanting to say the word in front of his teammates. Commander Velterra arrived at the scene, her 4 eyes taking in the situation immediately. She'd seen plasma weapon casualties before. She knew what they looked like. "Status report, Doctor." The readings are confusing, Dr. Winnar replied, frowning at her scanner. The weapon discharge was at maximum training intensity. The wall impact registered at nearly 2,000 pounds of force. Any known species would be... She gestured helplessly at her equipment. The gathered cadets held their breath. Some of the more religious species began whispering prayers for James's soul. Crystalise chimed softly, creating a mournful melody that echoed to the training bay. Suddenly, James groaned. Every conversation stopped. Every prayer ceased. Even the emergency klaxons seemed to quiet down. James shifted slightly, then groaned again, louder this time. His left hand came up to rub his chest, right where the plasma bowl had hit him. "Ow!" he said clearly, his voice carrying across the silent room. That actually hurt a bit. Dr. Winnar's scanner clattered the floor as her 6 legs gave out in shock. James sat up slowly, blinking in the bright emergency lights. He looked around at the circle of staring faces, noting their expressions of absolute disbelief. "Why'd we stop?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Are we done with training already? I thought we were supposed to reach the extraction point." "You were hit," Corvex whispered, his voice barely audible through his comm system. "Direct plasma strike. You saved my life, but you were hit." "Yeah, I remember that," James said, getting to his feet and dusting himself off. "Stung pretty good, too. Is everyone okay? Did we complete the objective?" The Etherian medic's energy form flickered and nearly winked out entirely. "This is impossible," she breathed. "He should be dead. He should be very, very dead." James looked down at his chest plate, which had a neat hole burned right through it. "Well, that's annoying. Do I need to requisition new armor, or can someone patch this up?" Dr. Winnar stared at him for a full 10 seconds before managing to speak. "How are you standing?" "With my legs." James replied, genuinely puzzled by the question. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but shouldn't we finish the exercise? The other teams are probably way ahead of us by now." And with that, James Mitchell became the first cadet in Academy history to ask for training to resume after taking a direct plasma hit to the chest. The Academy's medical bay had never seen anything quite like this. Dr. Winnar stood before the most advanced medical scanning equipment in the galaxy, watching readouts that made absolutely no sense. Around her, 3 other medical specialists from different worlds stared at their own instruments with identical expressions of bewilderment. James lay on the examination table, looking remarkably relaxed for someone who had just survived what should have been a fatal accident. He was chatting casually with Nurse Keelera, a gentle Altarian whose blue skin was currently flushed purple with confusion. "So you're telling me that all Altarians can change color based on emotions?" James asked, genuinely interested. "That's actually pretty cool. Do you ever use it to mess with people?" Kalara's skin shifted to a deeper purple. "We try not to," she replied softly. "It would be dishonest." "Fair enough," James said, "though I bet it comes in handy during poker games." Through the viewing window, a crowd of instructors had gathered to watch the examination. Commander Velterra stood at the center, her 4 golden eyes focused intently on the medical readings being displayed on the wall monitors. Beside her, Professor Zendak, the Academy's leading expert on xenobiology, was frantically taking notes on his datapad. "This is a 3rd comprehensive scan," Dr. Winnar announced the room, her compound eyes reflecting the soft blue light of her equipment. "I've used every medical diagnostic tool we have, including some experimental scanners from the Etherian Medical Consortium." The results were displayed on the main screen for everyone to see. Where there should have been massive internal trauma, broken bones, and tissue damage that would require weeks of recovery, the scans showed something completely different. Minor tissue bruising equivalent to what most species would experience from a gentle massage, Dr. Winnar continued, her voice getting higher with each word. "No broken bones, no internal bleeding, no nerve damage, no organ displacement. The plasma impact site shows less damage than a clickery paper cut." James heard this and looked over. "Hey, Doc, can I ask you something? On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad was that supposed to be?" Dr. Winnar paused her explanation and walked over to him. "James, I need to ask you some questions for our medical records. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst pain you've ever experienced. How would you rate what you felt when that plasma bolt hit you? James considered this seriously, staring up at the ceiling while he thought. Maybe a 4, he said finally. It felt like getting tackled in rugby, you know? Like when someone bigger than you hits you really hard and knocks the wind out of you. But the plasma part was new, kind of tingly. Tingly, Dr. Winnar repeated, her voice completely flat. Yeah, like when your foot falls asleep, but all over my chest for a few seconds. Weird sensation, but not really painful. Dr. Winnar looked at her scanner, then back at James, then at her scanner again, and the impact of the wall. Oh, that was worse than the plasma, James said matter-of-factly. Probably bumped it up to a 5. But honestly, my little sister Katie hits harder when we're wrestling around. She's got a mean right hook for a 12-year-old. In the viewing room, Professor Zendak dropped his datapad. Commander Velterra's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which was something she only did when she was extremely stressed. Your sister, Dr. Winnar said carefully, hits harder than a military-grade plasma weapon? Well, she knows where to hit to make it count, James explained. Plus, she's been taking martial arts classes. The plasma thing was just kind of random, you know? No technique to it. Behind the viewing window, several instructors were having quiet but intense conversations. Commander Velterra had pulled up the human physiological database on her personal tablet and was cross-referencing it with the plasma weapon specifications they'd used in training. The numbers that came up made her question everything she thought she knew about the universe. Human bone density, 3.2 times galactic average. Human muscle fiber density, 4.7 times standard. Human pain tolerance. The scale didn't go high enough to measure it properly. Their cardiovascular system was designed for a world with higher gravity than most species could even survive visiting. This can't be right, she muttered, double-checking the data. According to this, humans evolved on what amounts to a death world. High gravity, dangerous predators, extreme weather, toxic atmosphere. Professor Zendak retrieved his datapad from the floor. Commander, I've been researching human evolutionary history since James enrolled. Their homeworld, Earth, has gravity 20% higher than galactic standard. The atmospheric pressure would crush most of our students. And according to their own historical records, they spent thousands of years fighting each other with primitive weapons. You mean they developed this level of physical resilience through combat? Velterra asked. Not just combat. Their entire evolutionary process was basically a million-year-long survival course. They had to outrun predators that could bite them in half, survive climate changes that would wipe out entire civilizations, and develop tools while competing with creatures that were bigger, stronger, and had better natural weapons. Back in the medical bay, Dr. Winnar was staring at James like he was some kind of mythical creature. James, I need you to understand something. That plasma weapon was set to maximum training intensity. It's designed to incapacitate our toughest species instantaneously. Okay, James said, sitting up on the examination table. So what's the problem? The problem, Dr. Winnar said slowly, is that it barely left mark on you. Commander Velterra's voice came through the intercom system. Doctor, we may need to recalibrate our training protocols. James looked around the room at all the concerned faces. Are you guys saying I broke your equipment or something? Because I can pay for repairs if that's the issue. Dr. Winnar rubbed her forehead with one of her 6 hands. James, you didn't break our equipment. You broke our understanding of what's physically possible. James walked into the briefing room the next morning, expecting everything to be normal. What he found instead was 23 sets of eyes, optical sensors, and compound visual organs all locked onto him like he was some kind of celebrity. The usual morning chatter had died completely, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that seemed to echo off the walls. Morning, everyone, James said cheerfully, making his way to his usual seat in the back row. Beautiful day for training, right? Nobody responded. Throck, the massive Gorvani warrior, who usually greeted James with a friendly rock punch to the shoulder, just stared at him with his mouth hanging open. Crystal Lise, The Zephyrian Scout, was shifting rapidly through colors James had never seen before, creating a light show that would have been pretty if it wasn't so obviously distressed. "Did I miss something?" James asked, looking around the room. "Is there food stuck in my teeth or something?" A small Etherian cadet in the front row actually floated backward when James spoke, her energy form flickering like a candle in the wind. One of the Clickery students made a chittering sound that James had learned meant either extreme fear or someone was about to lay eggs. He really hoped it was a fear thing. "Guys, seriously, what's going on?" James tried again. "You're all acting like I grew a second head overnight." Beth, his teammate from yesterday's exercise, finally found her voice. Her musical tones were shaky and off-key. "James, you took a direct plasma hit yesterday, at point-blank range, and you just walked it off." "Yeah, so," James replied, genuinely confused by their reaction. "It hurt, but it's not like I lost a limb or anything." "That's exactly the point," squeaked a tiny Vorthan cadet from the middle row. "You should have lost several limbs. And your torso, and possibly your head." Before James could respond, Commander Velterra entered the room. The usual confident stride was still there, but James noticed she was carrying a thick stack of data pads and looking like she hadn't slept much. Her 4 golden eyes swept the room, lingering on James for just a moment longer than everyone else. "Take your seats," she commanded, and the room immediately fell silent. "We have some important announcements to make regarding training protocols." She moved the front of the room and activated the main display screen. Instead of the usual tactical scenarios or weapon specifications, a complex chart appeared showing different colored bars and numbers that meant nothing to James but seemed to make several cadets gasp in recognition. As of this morning, the Galactic Defense Academy is implementing new safety protocols based on recent discoveries regarding species-specific physical tolerances, Velterra announced. "Our previous training simulations operated under the assumption that all species fell within a certain range of physical capabilities." She gestured to the chart, where one bar stretched far beyond all the others. "We were wrong. Training simulations now have 4 difficulty settings," she continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone reading from an official script. "Standard for most galactic species. Advanced for species with enhanced physical capabilities. Thorian Maximum for our most resilient students." She paused and looked directly at James. "And Human?" The room erupted in whispers and chittering conversations. James raised his hand. "Ma'am, what exactly does that mean?" "It means, Cadet Mitchell, that your performance yesterday has prompted a complete review of our training standards. The weapons, scenarios, and safety protocols that we've used for decades are apparently inadequate for your species." "Inadequate how?" James asked. Commander Velterra pulled up another screen showing energy output measurements. "The plasma weapons we use for training are calibrated to incapacitate any known species with a single hit. You took a direct hit and described it as tingly." "It was tingly," James protested, "like a weird electric massage or something." "James," Velterra said patiently, "that weapon puts out enough energy to power a small space station for a week. It should have vaporized you." "But it didn't," James pointed out. "So what's the big deal?" The big deal, as it turned out, was that the Academy's entire medical staff had spent the night frantically researching human physiology and making some disturbing discoveries. According to the data they'd found, humans came from what the galactic community would classify as a class, 12 Death World. Most species couldn't even survive in the atmosphere, let alone evolve there. The review board is still determining appropriate training parameters for human cadets. Velterra continued. "In the meantime, you'll be participating in standard exercises with enhanced monitoring." James raised his hand again. "Ma'am, when do we get to try the live fire exercises? You know, with real weapons instead of training simulators." The room fell so silent that James could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Commander Velterra's 4 eyes blinked in sequence once, then twice, which James had learned was a Krillian equivalent of a double take. "Never," she said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Absolutely never." "But why not?" James asked. "If the training weapons aren't effective, shouldn't we use something that actually works? Because, Velterra replied slowly, if our training weapons can't hurt you, our live weapons might not either. And that raises questions about human military capabilities that, frankly, terrify the Academy board. James looked around the room at his classmates, who were all staring at him with a mixture of awe and fear. I'm just a regular guy from Ohio, he said helplessly. I play video games and eat too much pizza. I'm not some kind of super soldier. But even as Commander Velterra nodded and moved on to other announcements, she was already wondering what other surprises a human species might have in store for the galaxy. If James Mitchell was considered average by human standards, what were their actual soldiers capable of? The thought kept her awake for many more nights to come.